Well, I'm Betty McCollum, and it's a pleasure to be here to answer some questions that occupational therapists have had about how to become more involved in our democracy here in the United States.
How did you first become interested in politics?
Well, this is a very sentinel year for me. I turned 50. And in 1972, 18-year-olds got the right to vote. So I was one of the first group of 18-year-olds to vote in the United States. A combination of that and having a family that always had Walter Cronkite, Huntley and Brinkley on, always listened to the news. And so I knew it was something that was important, that was part of my everyday life. So I think that's what kind of started me interested in politics. And then I ran for my first office after moving into North St. Paul. My husband and I had two beautiful children, and one fell off of a 16-foot ladder. And a group of us mothers have been kind of standing around the slide going, why doesn't the city put more stand around it, everything else? I wasn't there the night Katie fell, and she's fine. She was fine that night too, but it was one of those things where if you wait for somebody else to always do it, if you don't pick up the phone and do it, sometimes things don't get done. And so the neighbors kind of drafted me to move for office.
What are the top 3 things someone should consider prior to deciding they will run for elected office?
The top 3 things people have to really look at, I think, in running for political office is the first one would be, can you take criticism? And if you're a person who's uncomfortable with being criticized, because there are people who will give you constructive criticism, and other people it'll be very destructive criticism. It'll be about you as a person, not the topic or the subject you're working on. So you have to be able to take criticism. I think the third thing, I was going to say it last, but I think I'll go in reverse order. Then I think the next most important thing is, are you a lifelong learner? Do you like to read? Are you really curious? Are you willing to do a lot of homework? And sometimes, I was going to mention that third, but I mentioned it in the middle because in order to be effective, you have to really be curious about the world around you, willing to dig deep, willing to ask questions, and follow through on your own for that. And then I think the other consideration for political office is, what are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up hobbies, leisure time? Are you willing to give up some family time? I'm fortunate in the fact that I come from a small family myself, and I have a small family. But people with very extended families that I've talked to when they're looking at running for office, they really have to think about how is this going to impact my relationship with not just my immediate family, but my cousins, my siblings, my great-aunts, my uncles, my parents.
What's been the impact on your family?
The impact on my family is that my kids will say that they don't have a quote-unquote normal mom. Especially now that I'm in Congress, they'll be listening to the radio in the morning and there's Mom as they're waking up in Minnesota on Minnesota Public Radio, and they might not have seen me in person for a week or two, but spoken to me on the phone. I've missed things, and it's been hard. When I was in the State House, I missed some of my son's swim meets. You know, kids going off to dances on nights that you're taking votes late at night. But there's also a lot of benefits for doing it for my family too. My family feels that they're very engaged in what's going on in the community, what's going on in the world, and they're very supportive of the work that I do. So there's trade-offs.
Do you think it's best if someone runs for a more local office before they tackle something like the State House or Congress?
You know, I had never thought of running for office until the accident at the playground. And the neighbors kind of said, well, somebody needs to go down to City Hall and see what's going on. And I walked down there, and there was going to be 2 open council seats in North St. Paul, and kind of came back and told that to folks. And I said, well, you know, I really love the guys that are on there, but you know, some of those guys have been on the council for 20 years. We should, you know, maybe get some young blood in there. I was much younger at the time. And so I ran, but I did lose my first election. And then I ran again 2 years later, and was the top vote getter in the whole city of North St. Paul.
So the first loss didn't intimidate you, and
No.
what did you do to prepare for
Well,
the
it
next?
goes back to what I said, the most important thing is about criticism. Running for office is not about who I am as a person.